Good morning, everybody. Good morning, and welcome to Magic in Mind. My name is Maggie Rose Cunningham. I'm going to be your host for about the next hour. We are going to be starting off by looking at working with the elements, and in particular, contrasting how you can work with the classical elements, the four elements of air, earth, fire, and water, and the beauty and the uniqueness and the difference that working with the Northern tradition elements offers. Very important, particularly in terms of looking at the magical self personally, at our personal magical selves, and also at the way in which humanity has evolved magically over the last 1,000 years and before that, and how that's changing at the moment. So I hope that you're looking forward to this session. So this is a wild card session. So every now and then, as you know, we flow through the phase of the moon. We follow and we track the moon. We work with the new moon, waxing, full, waning, and then every now and then we have a catch-up week, and this is a catch-up week. So next week we will be looking at the new moon, and we are going to be working with the sage, with the magical self of the sage for the next lunar cycle. But this week is wildcard week, and I asked people to write in, let me know, what would you like to take a deep dive into for this session. And a number of people brought up the elements, just questions about the elements kept coming up. So I thought, okay, this is going to be a good topic, a helpful topic for us to look at right now. Interestingly, we have a new moon in Hagalaz coming up. Look, these are my new rune cards that I'm playing with at the moment. I quite like this one. I like this one, this sort of Hagalaz card. It's interesting to me that it's Scorpio there in the half month of Hagalaz sits in Scorpio as well. Hi, Erica, lovely to see you. And yeah, and Hagalaz is a rune that is very much associated with the elements. When we do our readings around the elements, and thank you, Erica, you've shared your rune. So I'm going to attempt to note down the runes that people have. But if you can, hold on until we get to our stay and play part of the session, so that I don't lose your runes while we're talking about the elements. But I will make a note if you feel like I must share my rune now. Now, all of the runes have associations with the elements. They can be really helpful for us in coming to know the elements and working with them. But I do like Hagalaz as a rune that really encapsulates the elements, because it can come in a very balanced shape where it looks like a six-pointed star, and then it represents the sort of crystalline structure of the all. It feels very structured, organized, like elemental in the classical sense in which we might think about the elements. But then when it is in its older shape here with the Hagalaz symbol, you can see it's sort of like a capital H with a diagonal line. Then it's that resistor energy of breaking down and breaking up and reshaping and reforming, and the very foundation stones of who we are, what we believe the world to be, how everything is working around us are reshaped through this disruptor energy of Hagalaz, which I believe is coming through more strongly at the moment, after a period of time where humanity has perhaps worked on the assumption that it can control and organize and order the elements with the six-pointed star shape, with this balanced, orderly six-pointed star. Hi, Darcy, lovely to see you. Please do say hello in the chat box. I'm going to ask you a question now, so you can, whether you're here with me live, whether you're on the replay, please do answer the questions as we go through. You can always put hashtag replay and then put your answer, your response, because we can keep the conversation going through the weeks. And as people, all of these recordings are archived in the Hearth space. You can find them all in the guides section under Magic in Mind. So you can come and revisit them if you want to come back and look at the elements again. So the first question I've got for you is, have you worked with an elemental system before? So have you worked with an elemental system before? It doesn't matter whether it's the classical air, earth, fire, and water, or whether it's the northern tradition. Just give me a yes if you've worked with the elemental system, with any form of elemental system before. Carol, lovely to see you. So you have got north is there for Carol. So yeah, give me a yes. Give me the name of the elemental system as well if you'd like to. That would be really helpful, and maybe anything that's about how you've worked with the elements. So some people they do. It's about I create them through ritual. I work with them for balancing. I work with them for healing. Really helpful to know. Darcy saying yes, and you've worked with the Celtic for North and South American indigenous. Yeah. And so you can see that there are the working actually with elemental systems is really helpful for us in understanding the nuances and subtleties and differences between different forms of spirituality and magical practice. It can be a really helpful way of saying, okay, in order to have a way in, I understand one elemental system in one tradition, and a way into understanding another or bridging so that you can have a conversation, is to understand the differences in those elemental systems. Where are they similar? Where are they different? Michelle's saying Greek for balance and healing. Darcy's ritual and healing. Eric saying yes, Siberian and Celtic, shamanic and indigenous practices. Yeah, and it's important, I think, to note that we will have practices that are as far as is possible, however far they have been passed down by our ancestors in writing or orally. We can pursue indigenous practices which we are aiming to be faithful to and to honour. And it is very, very rare now for us to find, other than like very, very local environments. If you've got one of them, really, really lucky, and we thank you for keeping those and preserving those. But in so many traditions that have been shared across the world, they bleed into each other, they blend and they move into each other, and it's worth recognizing that. And for my personal viewpoint is that as long as we've done our sage research, and I've done my sage research, so I know how they evolved, where they came from, which are parts of the an indigenous practice, perhaps associated with land or with a particular form of healing work or spiritual work or shamanic work, then it's worth recognizing that we ourselves are now blended beings. Many of us, we are blended beings with heritage that spans the globe. We've trained in many, many different magical systems. And it is pretty much impossible for us as individuals to turn off part of our learning or part of our um, insight, our roads into insight, so that the elemental systems can blend inside us, even if they are unique and apart as entities. So, Carol, you're saying in ritual and in healing, in tarot, yep, absolutely. In tarot, you've got the four classical elements there: Celtic and American Indian. So, yeah, we've got people working from lots of different cultures within this space, and not so many people that I'm seeing in terms of the northern tradition, which is interesting. So this is, I'm going to give you a little, I'm going to be focusing on the classical system. So this is the air, earth, fire, and water, and sometimes also includes in it a fifth element, which is sometimes called ether, sometimes called spirit, and intriguingly, sometimes called void, which I quite like, which we'll come on to with the northern tradition work. And this was, broadly speaking, found across a number of major spiritual traditions in India, in Hellenistic Egypt. So when we get that sort of blurring and the blending of the Egyptian and the Hellenic cultures, and in ancient Greece. And you can go and look that up and you can see all of the different philosophers. And it was seen in many ways as being a philosophical system, a philosophical like mode of being. And these four elements, we'll come back onto the fifth in a moment. These four elements were often seen as being the foundation stone of everything else. They were sometimes called the roots, which I quite like. Again, it's a bit northern tradition there with the tree, um, and all other things were said to be like made up of these four elements. Now, with the fifth element, we get for those of you who've done like Wiccan work or magical work or magical practice, you know that the number four gives us that sense of stability, that real groundedness and stability. You can think about it as a table with four legs, that sort of really stable structure. And then the fifth element, which was considered sometimes, as I say, to be like the void or spirit, is often thought of as being the addition of consciousness, the addition of spirit to that mixture. And I think that's important because it places some important premises that then might influence our thinking. If we come from a Western background, that might influence our thinking. One of those is the idea that perhaps we have the physical world, and then the spirit, us or the divine, is somehow like comes down from above and it like illuminates or lights up this otherwise sort of inert or unconscious system. So somehow the fifth element is a part in some way. Now that's just one way that you can look at it. I'm not saying that that's always the way, but it is I believe it's a sort of a mode that's still around for us today. That we sort of say, I am a spirit. I'm inserted into this body, which is made up of four elements. I bring the fifth element in. I tootle around for my life. La la la. I'm having my conscious experience right now, and then we leave. You know, and that the body is somehow a vehicle. I do think that's important for us to bear in mind in terms of this elemental system. We also have the symbol of the pentagram that brings quite nice air, earth, fire, water, and spirit, which again does tend to place spirit. So a spirit is like the important bit. And Carrie was saying, yeah, you understand what I mean there in regard to Wicca. And this is something that I think if you have whatever elemental systems you have been using, particularly if there are ones that are embedded within the culture that you were born within, it is worth bearing in mind what does that therefore mean about the ways in which my cultural programming has informed my understanding of the way the world works. You know? This idea I've been reading a book which I love. It's called Radical Wholeness. So good. And it's this real reminder that in Western culture, like the head dominates, and you can almost see that in the five-pointed star that we've got the elements. Maybe it's sort of the in the hands and the legs, and then we've got spirit in the top. And the head dominates and is somehow controlling the body in some way. And this does come, it does come through. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm saying that it has been the narrative that we have lived in for a very long period of time. And what this means, as far as I'm concerned, is for the classical system promotes the idea of balance. It promotes the idea that that it's a closed system, which is beautiful for those of us who have a very strong magician self, because we can say, okay, I go into a space and I invoke air, earth, fire, and water. I am in the center, being the place of spirit, and it's very very powerful for us for creating ritual spaces that are safe because we have created a structure that is we've drawn on a shared understanding of the way the world works, which is a closed, secure, controlled system. And magicians like that. I mean, it's part of their job to like that because it's their job to bring change into the world, to make stuff happen. So they want to have their finger on the pulse of everything that's going on, but it also sort of woos them into this sense of security, which you can see in terms of the history of humanity through the course of the last 1,000 years in particular, this idea that we can master the physical world, that we can master the physical world, that we can build anything within it, that we can reap anything from it, that we can shape it and change it in whatever way we want to, that we can create technology that will manipulate it and move one thing to one place and transform something else into another, and that somehow we're in control of that. And what's coming in now, well, I say now, over the last 30 years, maybe actually more than that, really, for people who have the strong seer energy or healer energy, there's a problem with that, which is that the world is not a closed system, or if it is a closed system, we do not have a full understanding of it. And that those four elements, beautiful as they are, can offer us the illusion that we can control everything, that we can control the consequences, and that the world is intended as almost like a plaything for us in some ways. Now, I'm saying this with love because I do believe that the classical system offers like profoundly powerful modes of being, but it's worth bearing in mind that it's very intoxicating for the magician self, so we need that balance. It's also intoxicating for the sage, or at least an aspect of the sage, which the sage wants to know, the sage wants to understand. And the system of air, earth, fire, and water offers us that ability to understand everything. Because it says here is imagine we've got a circle with this classical symbol. I should have my whiteboard out here. It's a shame. Do I have my whiteboard? Let me see. Yes, I do. Hold on. Woo! I'm going to just draw the symbol. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it already. But so here's the, there we go. So that's the often used as the symbol of Earth or of the four elements. It's like the way the Earth works. Again, important. Bear that in mind. And then what we can do is we can classify. We can neatly put everything into one of these boxes or in the realm of spirits, and then everything is okay, and we feel like we're in control. It's knowable. Now there is a part of the sage, particularly if we have not balanced ourselves, we don't have those other aspects of the self that likes that likes to know. Um, I can every experience that I'm going to have can be neatly compartmentalized into one of these four boxes, and that makes me feel safe and secure. You know? The sage likes that. The magician likes that as well. Hi, Suki, love to see you. Oh, I'm sorry that you have a migraine. Wunyo to you too. Okay, so this is that's the classical system. And as I say, it really does have its place, particularly for magicians just starting out and for sages just starting out. It's just you get to that point where you need to be able to move on as well and to experience others. And I love it that there's so many people in this space who have said, I've tried this system, I've tried that system. And it's always worthwhile mastering at least one, really mastering it, knowing it really, really well. And the four element system is it's simple, it's not powerful, by the way. It's simple, and so it's really effective for us to work with. But it's then that process of questioning and moving into the realms where the seer and the mystic and the healer to a certain extent as well have their realms of play. So I'm going to, actually, I tell a lie. Before I do that, I wanted to bring in here. So we've got that elemental system, which is a spiritual or a philosophical system. And then, of course, we have if you read, I think there's the Wikipedia entry that talks about the elemental systems. And then it said, these elemental systems have now been discounted by science because we now have the periodic table. So we have it doesn't say actual, but there's maybe a little bit of a, suggestion there now that we actually know how the world works, which is very sciencey, isn't it? And you can actually hear within that the magician and the sage voices there. So it's like transposed. Okay, four elements, they're not going to quite work, but we've got the periodic table, and that explains how everything actually does work. And the sage goes, yeah, I absolutely really like that. And look, it's neat because it's put into boxes, and we have a nice little classification system. And so this is the chemical elemental system, which is a physical system. It's a physical system. But I like the periodic table. And for me, the Northern tradition spans that spiritual aspect of the four elements of the classical, and it brings in some of this stuff around the periodic table as well. So I'm going to read to you an excerpt from the Poetic Edda, which is, let me see, the streams called ice waves, those which were so long, came from the fountain heads, that the yeasty venom upon them had hardened like the slag that runs out of the fire. These then became ice, and when the ice halted and ceased to run, then it froze over above. But the drizzling rain that rose from the venom congealed into rime, and the rime increased, frost over frost, each over the other, even into Ginnunga Gap, the yawning void. I want you to remember this. I'm going to come back to it in a moment, but I want you to remember that piece from the Poetic Edda, which bear in mind that the Eddas offer us fragments of a very, very rich, ancient, old culture that we are only seeing glimpses of, and largely seeing glimpses through the eyes of people who are not part of that culture. So you can imagine the richness and the variety of stories that this one has surfaced and has been remembered. So from this piece, alongside alongside some others, but this is one of the major pieces that we glean the Northern Elemental System from. If you look at books about runes or about the Northern tradition, you will tend to find a system that goes something like this. We have the Great Void, Ginnung Gap, and then we have ice and we have fire. And ice is often seen as being it's cold, it's dark, it's form, and then we have fire. It's hot, it's illuminating, it's destructive and creative, and it is force. And these two like opposing opposite forces or force and form come together, and the remaining elements are then born from them. They arise from them. But even that neatness, which is very nice, and there is a lot that we can learn from that idea, and there are some differences in terms of thinking about the way that force and form come together. Um, it's interesting that it talks about the void there, not so much as being a spirit, as a place of potential, whereas the fifth element in the Greco-Romans, obviously, with this, then gets connected with spirit or consciousness. The void is different in terms of the northern tradition. I quite like that. When um, when there might have been some overlaps even earlier in history. But even within this narrative piece, the story of the elements coming into being, there are some bits that don't fit with that construction of ice and fire. Because in the Ginunga Gap, we know that there are two realms. One is called Muspelheim, the realm of fire, fair enough, and one is called Niflheim, and that does not mean realm of ice, it means realms of mists. And then in this piece, it talks about the streams called ice waves. So you have to imagine that they are fluid and they are moving, and there are fountain heads like shooting out of something in Niflheim, maybe creating this mist. And we have this yeasty venom. And it's only when this yeasty venom that's come in the mist like settles down that we then start to get this hardening. And it hardens like slag, which is in the fire realm. So we also know that fire isn't the only element in the fire realm. Slag is being that byproduct of the creation of iron, byproduct of the creation of glass. Really interesting, this idea of as creation occurs, there are things that we are having tended to make, and there are things that we did not intend to make. We have byproducts like slag, and that's right there at the beginning. Now it says that the realm of ice has this, then the ice solidifies, and we get these, first of all, the solid. You might think about it being like an ice sheet over these fluid streams of ice. And then we get rime, which is frost. It's sort of ground frost that hardens one layer over the other, over the other, over the other. So the ice realm is not originally solid. It becomes solid. It becomes ice after the interaction of all of these other elements. And the fire realm is not just fire. There is other stuff going on there. We have to imagine maybe that if slag is already there, it means that something else is already there. So here are the list of some of the elements that we know within the northern tradition. So we have rime, so we've mentioned that with the frost that goes over the ice. We've got ice and fire, obviously. We've got slag, and we know that iron is mentioned sometimes, and there is almost an implication that if there is slag, then there is iron as well. We have salt. Salt comes through as an element, which I like within the northern tradition as well. And I like the fact that if you think about salt and you sprinkle salt on ice, melts, doesn't it? Because it reduces the temperature. Oh, I'm saying this as if I know. What am I talking about, scientists? But it reduces the temperature and makes it melt. Anyone who wants to tell me exactly why it is that salt melts ice, put it into the chat box there. I find it fascinating. We have air, the flow of air. So air does feature, but does not feature in this narrative telling. There is mist, which what does the mist travel through if not through air? Or is mist part of air? We don't know. Exciting. We have yeast. Think about yeast and the magical qualities of yeast and how long our ancestors have been working with yeast to create bread and beer. Incredibly magical element. And we have earth, the earth itself. And we also have venom. They talked about yeasty venom, didn't they? And venom can often mean venom in terms of things like serpents and things, but it can also mean from plants. Any plants that sting us or that a bee sting, anything like that is considered to be venom. So the northern tradition elements, unlike the classical elements that are a system through which we can order and understand the universe as a place that we can work with and we can sort into, um, northern tradition cosmos is continually evolving. It is a wild place. And instead of looking to say, okay, and I'm now going to imagine my space, and I'm casting a beautiful circle. It's a wonderful circle, and I've got air in one corner, and fire, and earth, and water in the different quarters there. and they're then blending beautifully. They have gateways that they come into from my space, my lovely magical circle, and they come in, and then I draw those elements in, and with I bring in my spirit, my consciousness of spirit, and I transform them into deep and potent magic. You In the northern tradition, it is much less predictable, let's say. We are in a space of observing, and of experiencing. It's a little bit like the difference between a controlled research environment where you've got a petri dish and you are very carefully selecting. I'm going to select air, earth, fire, and water. I'm going to put it in my petri dish, and then I'm going to be able to predict what will happen. And working out in nature, and say like baking a loaf of bread. And today we can predict much more. What our yeast contains, whether it's going to work, whether it's going to not, the right balance. Couldn't always do that in the past, and bread making was could have some unexpected side effects. Just going and having a look at the science of yeast production in itself, in its own right, is fascinating. Excuse me, I'm just putting my whiteboard down. It's just getting in the way a bit. And so when we perform magics here, I remember I ran a guild, a Northern Tradition guild, for a long period of time because it was lovely. I loved it so much. And one of the things that we did in our blessing rituals is we would have a bowl of yeast that we would grow under the altar during the course of the ritual. And I have to say, every time that yeast was different. And some of them, these like really potent, powerful rituals, you'd come and the head of the yeast was like, it was enormous. It was huge, like foaming mass. Other times it would hardly have grown at all. It would be more like just a tiny froth on the surface in like intricate patterns that you could read, and that you could work with your seer self to read. And I've done a lot of experimental work, and this is how working with your Northern tradition elements can differ, because they invite you to experiment, they invite you to try, they invite you to work with salt, you know, preserve your own meat is one of the things that we did, or build your fire outside and cook upon it. Work with the elements as wild, unpredictable forms. Very, very different to working in a controlled space. It's almost inviting in the spirits of the elements. So this is what I wanted to bring in as my final piece for you in thinking about the elements and why they might differ, and why, for example, nurturing your mystic, who wants to adventure out and wants to learn new things, nurturing your seer, who wants to be fully present to the world around them, is not going to operate to the optimal function in the petri dish environment. They need the real world to work with. Working with the Northern tradition elements can be incredibly powerful to do that. But I wanted to bring within this first of all, I wanted to say, which I didn't say, about this evolving observed experiences. There is nothing to suggest that the Northern tradition list of elements is complete, and I believe personally that the list should include other elements like blood, the carrier of life force itself, and honey comes up a lot for me as well as another like potent, um, magical material. Is that one of a better word? Compound? I don't know what to call it, but that we can look at this with if they've got a spirit to them, if they've got something that we're working with, this sort of potent energy that we work with through the course of our lives, then why wouldn't they be elements? Why wouldn't we work with them as elemental beings, as elemental forces that we can work with through time? So I wouldn't eliminate that. So that's what I wanted to come on to, looking at the Northern tradition in terms of thinking about the spirit of the elements themselves. So we can work with the spirit of air, earth, fire, and water, and they can feel like beautiful forces coming through us. But there is something deeply intimate when you work with the elements in the Northern tradition. And I have found that it is much more powerful to work less with the concept of ice, which is wonderful. It gives you loads of stuff, and it's in some way sort of similar to the classical elements. You can bring in the spirit of ice and feel that stillness and the form and the substance. We do a lot of work with that in with the runes. They bring that in because they are generic, um, all-encompassing forces, but working intimately with elements by building a fire collecting honey, I've mentioned, working with like nettles, for example, for venom. I had a friend gifted me a snake skin that I worked with when I had my altar for venom, and creating, that these places of sacred play for the northern tradition elements can be incredibly powerful. I've got an article, I'll post it for you. It's an article I did, I think it's about a year ago now, maybe longer, and I did it on plastic. And what would happen if we adopted plastic, or we don't even need to adopt plastic, if we named plastic as an element and we saw it as being precious rather than as being like throwaway. And I think the plastic has been demonized in our society when it's not plastic's fault that we made it. And I think this is important. Now, imagine that we treated plastic as being as precious, if not more precious, than gold, because of the amount of effort that goes into making it, and the fact that once it's in shape, it's incredibly difficult to then move it into a different shape. You know? And if we're going to use it, we should be treating it as something that is precious and to be kept. Now, I'll have a look at the article we did, but I did a piece on working with the spirit of my grandmother's yellow cake Tupperware container that she had. It was secondhand when she got it. Then she passed it to my mum, and then now I have it now. And I feel into it, and I feel it as a spirit. There are some people who will say, I feel into the spirit of plastic, and there's nothing there. It is a soulless object. I don't agree. I think that when we treat plastic with reverence, it can have spirit. When we treat it as if it is an item that we throw away and that we disparage and we don't like, then it becomes filled with just like this dead, sad energy that does not feel good to it. So I'm going to get off my high horse there, because you can read the article if you're interested in it. And Carrie was saying my son works with plastic and molds it into shapes. Yeah, and I think, it's not, we shouldn't have all. There's just too much plastic, isn't there? We've made too much of it. It's too easy for us to make it. We don't respect it in the way that we respect other things that we have in our homes. And this is true of a lot of stuff that we have. Darcy was saying animism, absolutely. So this brings us into the territory of animism. And I meant to have a glass with me here. I don't have a glass. I have a cup instead. My husband very nicely brought me a cup of tea, which is lovely. But I meant to bring a glass. Okay, so I want you to imagine, you can do this later for yourself. Get yourself a glass, just any old glass, and you're going to fill it with water. And notice how in ritual spaces we might often be like, we'll bring the glass and we'll put the water in it, and stuff. And we often focus on the water, pure, lovely spirit of water. And we say, well, the glass is lovely because it echoes that spirit of water, and we can see the water within it, and that's why we chose the glass, and all of those things. But if you bring a glass and you hold it in your hands, and you think about this glass and you connect with it, I want you to remember that glass itself is made up of a mix of sand, like quartz crystals, of what used to be called soda ash. It's now called sodium carbonate. So it's like a white, odorless salt. So it's got salt in there as well. So it's got like a particular form of earth with the quartz crystals of sand, and limestone. Those are the main ingredients that your glass has been made of, and then it has been heated, so it's got fire within it. And I'm less thinking about it as being fire. Think about it as the actual fire that made this glass, and the memory that this glass contains of the particular, almost like mother spirit of fire that heated it and transformed it and changed it and shaped it, almost like it's sort of like a womb-like fire. And then it's also worth bearing in mind that glass typically has some iron in it as well, like a small amount of iron. So it's got that iron within it as well. And obviously we have iron in us too, you know. And I really like as well, and this is something that has just I just didn't know it, so it's one of those things that slag. I've worked with slag as being a byproduct of iron for a long time, but you also get slag glass, which is the byproduct of glass, which is often like really treasured now by by vintage like collectors of glass, because it comes in these like amazing shapes and it comes with particular colours in it. So it makes these objects of great beauty and great uniqueness when this sort of byproduct glass. And I was just like, oh, it's fascinating. I love that, this sort of unintended. And I think that's worth bearing in mind in the Northern tradition, that when you work with the elements, there's always going to be an unintended consequence. It might be good, it might be bad, it might be bad. Um, no, and that's okay. It's about embracing that unintended quality as well. And I forgot to say with iron as well, that that iron actually makes the glass stronger. So the presence of another element inside it makes the glass stronger. Carol saying the glass row is written by Daphne du Maurier. Excellent. We shall add that to our reading lists. Thank you very much, Carol. So there is so much richness. Let me just have a little look at your comments. They had an interesting couple of comments that I wanted to bring back in. So Darcy saying, in my Andean tradition, other elements are allowed, like honey. Honey is in my medicine bundle as an element. There you go. Yeah. So you can see how this the world view that accompanies the stories about how the elements are made shapes the continuation of the story about how we work with those elements. And there is absolutely a place for working with the four classical elements, as I hope I've made clear, for particularly for magicians stepping into claiming their power, and for sages who are looking to find a foundation for the knowledge that they're going to build on. But it's sort of recognizing that that's what they are, that they're foundations. But then the northern tradition elements and some of the other traditions that have been mentioned here have very, very different worldviews about, oh yes, you can absolutely. There is an animism component. There is a wild component that's not about control, that is about partnership and about unpredictability. There is a continually evolving, new elements might emerge, which fits quite nicely in, doesn't it, with the periodic table view. You remember I was talking about that periodic table view um, right at the beginning. So there are some, I love some little bits and pieces there around, the idea of the void, which crosses traditions, the idea of roots, the roots of the world tree and all of the elements evolving within the world tree, rather than there being like four foundations that come through from that. And animism, where we were talking about spirit, weren't we? And it's less that there is a principle of spirit that comes along and is inserted into a physical place, a physical object, and more the sense in which, as a physical object evolves, the spirit of that object evolves with it. You know? Anyone who's ever read the Anglo-Saxon poem "The Dream of the Rood," such a great example of the idea of an object having spirit. So the spirit is not swooping down and coming in. It is birthed within and part of the evolution of the elements as they sort of dance their way through life. So that was our teaching, our sharing on elements. Please do anything else that you'll share. Anything if you've on the replay, let us know. See what's landed for you. Keep your questions coming, and I love this topic. I should say, if you are interested in this, I have a whole module on the elements in the Awaken program, which is open for booking now. Your elements module, if you're joining now, won't open until next year. But there is everything is already open for you for diving into your runes, which we're going to do momentarily, and for working with the master classes that we're looking at the moment, so your seership and your healing, so that by the time you get onto the elements, you've got really lovely foundations with your runes. So that is available for you to work with at the moment. If you have done Awaken already and you're thinking, I want to go deeper into the elements, then get in touch with me about Idrazel's Path, which is my Northern Tradition shamanic program, which is running at the moment. But I already have people saying I'm on the waiting list for 2025, and it is a small group program. So if you're thinking, yeah, I really want to take this work with the elements deeper, that is your place to go and look for. I'm glad you're looking forward to the module, Darcy, and I know that yeah, you are enjoying Drizzle's Path as well. So yeah, it's a fun module, the elements module there. Okay, so that was my piece about Awaken. Let's look at the planets. Let's look at the planets. Let's look at the runes. So this week we do not have any planetary movements. We're in wildcard week and nothing is shifting or changing, which I think is a good thing, because I feel as if particularly the lunar energy has been very, very strong and very, very potent. So this is such a wonderful time for rebirth, balancing. You know, this is why if you want to get your crack out the magician and crack out the sage and do some work with your four elements, that's absolutely wonderful. If you wanted to just select one element and say, I'm going to feel into working with fire, and I want to experience it as a wild energy, as a wild energy, and that there's a difference between a candle that I light by my bedside. And if you're lucky, and I'm very lucky, I have a fire in my house. It's one of the things that I grew up with a fire in my house, and I was the eldest child, so I was the one who was given the responsibility for tending the fire. You know, that opportunity to tend to the spirit of a fire, to build this fire from scratch, and to tend it is so beautiful. You know, find these opportunities where an element presents itself to you and says, "Hello, no, um, I'd like to be your friend." You know, find those. I'm just writing these down. Is when I'm speaking and writing down at the same time I get it wrong. So I'd written Gibo Gibo instead of Gibo Darcy, which is not very helpful. And Suki, you're saying you have got Wunyo. Okay, so please do share your runes, and then when we will get to them, I will start to go through them. Karen is saying the wildness of bushfires. Yes, absolutely. And it is worth bearing in mind that for some of these, I did a piece with a client. She brought, it was really powerful working that we did, where the spirit of fire at our present time, particularly wildfire, is causing so much disruption in our world. Darcy says I can change my name. You don't need to change your name to keep. Lovely as it is. Lovely as it is. I like Darcy. I like Darcy. I'll work on getting your name right, Darcy. But thank you for the offer. Much appreciated. Um, and we worked with the spirit of the fires that are coming and being destructive at this point, and it was such a powerful moment of feeling into this spirit of fire and saying, you know, it is my nature to be fire. It is my nature to arise in response to what is happening in the world. Now, and obviously, some fires are caused naturally, but others are caused by human beings, either through negligently leaving litter and rubbish where they shouldn't, or lighting a fire without thinking about it properly, but also through climate change as well. And fire is saying, I did not cause myself to be born. You know? Um, and it actually it said, give me the opportunity to heal and create as well as to destroy. Give me that opportunity. And through that process, it was a very profound process of being with the spirit of fire and recognizing that it was not the cause of the destruction. It was simply fulfilling its nature and embracing that relationship that we have with a relationship of respect for fire, for its transformative qualities, and for the byproducts of fire, negative and positive, the unintended byproducts of fire. And the fire sort of saying, embrace me as you would a human being to that extent, that we have some things that are beautiful and wonderful and powerful about us, and we have things that are weak and vulnerable and need to be tended as well. So yes, wildfire is often considered to be this sort of, this force, this terrible force, and yes, it is a terrible and absolutely destructive force. But there is a relationship that we can have um, with it as well. Oh, I wasn't expecting that to come through. So we don't have any planetary movements this week. What I will say is that we will be having our next issue of Sooner Star Wheel coming out, ready for our next new moon week, which will be next week. So if you are not a member of Sooner Star, well, it is a perfect time to join. You will be receiving your planetary movements for the month ahead so that you can really feel into them. You can start to work with them. And we will be having within your pack, you will get your new moon in Hargalaz meditation. You remember I was talking about Hargalaz as being their element. So we'll be embracing that energy of Hargalaz through the new moon. So you can feel into that. It's a wild voice journaling experience. So it takes you deep into the self, deep into the core, voice within, maybe the voice of your seer, the voice of your mystic, your healer, the magical self. And then we allow that voice to rise so that you can experience your relationship with that room through the energy of the new moon in that moment. So we have the new moon in Hagalaz and we have the full moon in Ingu. So you get two meditations to use during the course of the month alongside here are all of your planetary movements and this is what we're going to be working with and a bit about the northern traditions. It's a really lovely, easeful way of finding the magic of the month, working with the magic of the month through your Sooner Style membership. So I'll pop that into the chat as well for you as well. So that is coming next week. But this week we don't have any planetary movement, so my invitation would for you would be to work with the elements. Thank you, saying ha ha Hagalaz. I'm assuming you have Hagalaz as well. Let's do your Hagalaz because we've talked a little bit about Hagalaz. So in case you weren't there at the beginning, I would be feeling into that difference between the stable form of Hagalaz, the six-pointed star shape of Hagalaz, and feeling that sense of the Hagalaz rune as almost birthing that which must be in whatever way it needs to, that elemental form. Now, similar to what we talk about the spirit of fire, being what it must be, is the um, six-pointed star bit, and then the Hagalaz rune in its older shape is the less predictable, not being what it must be, being what it will be, you know, and feeling into those possibilities as well. What does it mean to embrace the walking forwards into the storm and then becoming the storm? You know, at what point do we say, okay, I can no longer control the storm in my petri dish? And I need to accept the wildness around it. And Hagalaz invites you into that, Maggie. So if you've got Hagalaz, then that is what we are looking for. I'm glad that you brought that rune up. The other rune that I wanted to bring up, actually, and it hasn't come up for any of you, but I think it's important, is the Uruz rune. So Uruz is the second rune in the Elder Futhark, and it's a really good rune for working with the elements because it embraces the all. It is this, it's almost like the spirit, I feel, of the primal elements without a sense of to I need to do anything. So Hagalaz is the change making, you know, it sort of brings change, it brings that destruction. Uruz is the forming principle, it's the formation or the birthing of the elements. And you'll find within that the elements related to slag that I've mentioned, to the unintended that are still embraced within the form of Uruz. Uruz embraces the all. So it's a wonderful rune for receiving the healing of the elements, for sort of being out in nature, for opening to its possibilities with the Uruz rune, sort of wildness and preservation quality that Uruz has as well. So it's that almost, you can think about it as that time of birthing when fire in Muspelheim was doing its own thing and ice over there was doing its own thing, and they were sort of seeing what was coming, and it was before the storm energy of Hagar, almost before the spirit knew itself. Not a time of conflict. It's a time where there was room for everything. You know, there was room for everything. We hadn't got to the point where there was any form of competition. You know? And Uruz is such a beautiful rune for that sort of healing sense there. Let's have a look at the other runes that you've brought up. So, Erica, you've got Bacano, and Bacano is such a beautiful rune for that feeling into it's sort of the gentler side of nature, but it's the gentler side of nature as the great mother. You know, there is a soothing and an easing of those wounds that have been created by our experience of the world that can come through Bacano. It's almost like with Bacano, we grow bigger. You know, it's not that we grow like tougher. Oh, the world is hard and it's difficult. I can't manage it. Bacano says, sink into me, and through that process, become bigger. And then, you know, it's almost like we have our little petri dish, and then the glass breaks, and then other elements start to sneak in. You know, if you think about the penicillin, wasn't it penicillin that came up and that wasn't expected? It was like that gift from the outside world that made us go, oh, you know, if we try and control everything, we miss important stuff. And Bacano says, rather than just seeing what's in the petri dish, allow yourself to see the room in which the petri dish is held, and allow yourself to see the land upon which the room is founded. And then whatever's happening in the petri dish, even though it's vital and important, becomes less the be all and end all of everything. And that's what Bacano is calling at this point. It's that sinking into, expanding into. Which room wants to call next? We've done all I think Michelle with Suelo, the Suelo rune. So Suelo rune brings in like the element of fire, but it is fire in the form of light. Now, if you think about that interplay between darkness and light that Suelo represents and the turning wheel, there is a sense in which, there's a lot coming through with the Suelo rune. There is a sense of movement here. It's almost the way in which the dark represents a stillness and a receiving. And then the light is that movement. It's almost like, we talk about enlightenment, that sort of expanding beyond one boundary into the next. So it has to be in movement in order for us to find the light, to find enlightenment, to find the next step on our journey. We have to be in movement. And I think that's sometimes true where, we can sort of sit there and I'm going to meditate, until the answer comes. I'm meditating, the answer's not coming. Why is it not coming? I'm looking for enlightenment. I'm looking for enlightenment. My eyes are shut. I'm in the dark. It's not coming. It's not coming. And then we say, I'll go for a walk. You know, and then you go for a walk, and suddenly the answer comes. And I think what the Sewello rune is saying that there is almost that time of being in that space of darkness and receptivity is required before we get into movement. But if we stay in that dark place, if we stay in that place of stillness, the change doesn't come because it's the interaction between ice and fire that causes the seed that is then sown within the void of Ginunga Gap from which the great tree springs and all of the other worlds bloom and flower. So it's recognizing that rhythm of stillness and movement as being how change is brought out into the world, how we manifest, how we create, how we find new ideas. Is that movement. So that's what's coming through for the Suelo rune there. Darcy with your Gibo rune. I wanted to bring this one in now because there is also a movement with the Suelo rune. You get the movement of Suelo, literally, spiraling around, that comes through. And with the Gibo rune, we can have the same thing. But the Gibo rune, it does have this ordering quality to it. If we look at the Gibo rune here, and the Gibo rune almost embodies that structure we were talking about. It's this sense of which, we make a promise, we make a commitment, we make a contract, and it is bound within the structure, all of the premises, all of the assumptions that we have made in that moment about what that promise means or what that gift given offers to us. And we can think, oh, that's the end of it. The promise has been made, but the wheel keeps turning and the Gibo wheel keeps turning all of the time. But if you imagine that it's a little bit like a water wheel, the water that flows through the Gibo rune is always changing. It's always flowing. And so a promise that is made up of the fixed nature of the promise. This is what we said we would do, and the continually changing context, that is the inevitable flow of time that occurs. That means that sometimes we have to reshape that, and the wheel needs to change, and it needs to be adapted, and that can be quite, difficult and challenging for us when the situation is always going, when the wheel is always turning, There is almost an intentionality with the Gibo rune about saying, okay, I have been following this path for such a long time that it feels like it's the only path available. The wheel must keep turning, the water must keep flowing, and there is quite a lot of effort that needs to be required to stop the wheel and to say, for a period of time, I'm going to stop that flow from turning because maybe a new wheel is needed, or it's become stuck in the petri dish. We've got stuck in the petri dish and we need to expand outwards, and the wheel needs to be adapted and changed and shifts. So the sort of slightly like mystical, intangible one there for you, Darcy. But there's something there, like meditating on the idea of a promise or a commitment being made that then fixes our expectations and our understanding of a situation, even though in reality that situation is shifting and changing all of the time. So sometimes we need to just say, let's all stop. Let's all stop and see where we are now and what might need to be revisited and how that wheel might need to shift or change. I suppose similar to what I've been talking about here, that we can get stuck within one way of thinking, one mode of belief, one system of belief, and then we need to step back from it in order to look at it and say, okay, what am I unaware of? What am I subconsciously still drawing on that's no longer relevant or necessary? Our Gibo rune. So we've got the Wunyo rune and the North is rune to come. So here we go with the Wunyo rune, with Suki's Wunyo rune. There we go. Wunyo. Ah, the Wunyo rune. To me, the Wunyo rune is about the spirit of exploration for its own um, ends. It's not I've got a purpose that I need to fix or follow. It's just I'm just following this path because it feels right, because it feels good to do so. It's like the unexpected, serendipitous possibilities that come when we follow our curiosity, our joy, our wonder, you know, all of those things. And we open ourselves to just saying, I'm not going to be in any way trying to shape the outcome of this. Just going to follow my senses, my sensing self with the Wunyo rune into the week ahead, into what comes. So, yeah, let go of the should do's and move into the possible want to do's. See what comes from there, see what the Wunyo rune has to offer for you. And finally, we have the North is rune there for you, Carol. I'm reminded with the Gibo rune that the North is rune to me often represents the Gibo rune, like the inevitable point at which the Gibo rune goes from being balanced to being there's like a tension that comes, if you think about it as being two threads that have been pulled together, and then the circumstances change and the water sort of flows, and stress and strain is placed upon the Gibo rune, and it becomes the North is rune saying, re-examine this, look at this again, look at the possibilities again. We mentioned wildfire, didn't we? And North is the spirit of wildfire. It's the spirit of the unconstrained um, elements. It can be the spirit of the elements out of balance, and there is something out of balance that needs to be looked at. But it can also be the call of the wild self in you, coming and saying, come and be with me, commune with me. That wildness that you see outside of yourself is inside as well. Now, when I went on my run this morning, I was feeling quite a lot of weight, feeling quite a lot of heavy weight. So I just kept on running and I kept on running, and I was journeying like outwards and still, wanting to keep going and keep going. And it still felt heavy. And it just got to the point where I was like, well, I've got to go home now. I've got to go home now. I'm still not feeling that sense of freedom that I like to enjoy when I go running. But it's time to go home. It was almost like that necessity, that constraint piece came around. I was like, okay, I'm gonna give up on releasing whatever it is that's holding me back at this point. And I turned, and as I turned, everything changed in that moment. Like everything changed. The sun was rising over the town that I live in, and I had come, a long way out, and I was out in the fields. And I turned back to look at the town, and it was a bit like looking at a petri dish and realizing it's just a petri dish, you know. And I'm out here. I'm not in it. I'm not in it at this point. All of that tension just sort of slipped away, and it was almost like the moment that I gave up wanting to, like, need to let it go. I need to let it go. Put it out. Put it out. And I was just like, oh, no, fine. I'll turn and I'll go and I'll look at the stuff and I'll do the thing. And I turned back and I realised I've already left it. Like I'm already outside of it. Oh my god, it was so lovely. It was so nice. It was so nice. And it was interesting because it's like I didn't find it running away from. I found it in the moment of returning to. That was when I realised that I was not controlled by the thing that I was like running away from. As the minute that I decided, yeah, I'm going to go back to it, it's fine, was when it released that sense of heaviness and weight. And there's something there with the North is doing about sometimes sort of recognizing we can keep on you know, running away or trying to release ourselves. But the minute that we look back and we start that return journey, sometimes that's when we realise that um, we were never constrained in the first place. You know? So have a little feel into that. So that is Magic in Mind for this week. Just a little reminder, Awaken is open. It is open to join. If you're thinking about it, don't think about it for too long because the early bird investment is available at the moment, but it will close on the 21st of December. So now is a great time to be like, yes, if I want to do it now. Get that early bird price for yourself for Awaken. Soon as Star Wheel is open to join for the coming months. So you can get those two lovely meditations and Hargalaz and Ingus. And there is also time still to join Reclaim Your Seer, which is my mini retreat, which is running tomorrow, which is a really deep dive into. It's like a power retrieval for your seer self. It is reclaiming of that part of yourself, a reconnection to that part of yourself, an initiation into seer, whether that is your strongest self and you want to claim it more deeply, or whether it's part that is less potent or less powerful for you right now, and you're looking to say, okay, you know, I want to connect with this part of myself. So, 3 lovely opportunities for you coming up. Um, yeah, for you to feel into. Many blessings to you all. Darcy, I'm very glad that you're feeling buoyed up by the elements. I love working with the elements. So, elemental blessings to one and all, and I will see you very soon.